Since the advent of photography, billions of images depicting iconic events and people have been taken. But as color cameras only became commonplace around 1960, half of photographic history still remains in black and white. Thankfully, skilled colorists around the world have brought rare historical photos to life like never before. Try to spot someone not wearing a hat in this photograph of British suffragette Emmeline Pankhurst addressing a crowd on Wall Street in November 1911. Pankhurst was a key campaigner for women's right to vote, which was eventually granted in Britain 7 years later in 1918, and in 1920 for white American women. It's surprising to see so many men interested in suffrage. But as non-landowners had only recently got the vote themselves, the chance to double working-class voting power by including women was attractive. This colorization by Santa Dalloway really brings the crowd to life, and contemporary reports suggest that young hoodlums tried to drown Pankhurst out with shouts, while older men listened with intent. Here's the instantly recognizable Marilyn Monroe photographed in 1954. This colorization by 1RED-SF1 breathes life into a photograph of a young woman on the cusp of worldwide renown. When this was taken, Monroe had already become one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but she was still underpaid in comparison to others of her stature. When she refused to shoot yet another musical comedy, Monroe was suspended by Fox, causing a scandal. But a swift marriage to Joe DiMaggio and a reconciliation with Fox restored her stardom, landing her iconic role in The 7-Year Itch. This photo shows kids swimming in the then-segregated town of Greenbelt in Maryland, USA in 1942. A vibrant color version by Dynamic Chrome transforms the image into a scene of scorching summer fun, and even highlights the wooden slide, which may have been waxed daily before plastic became readily available. It's strange to imagine that the subjects of this photograph would be about 85 years old today, although only a third may still be alive. This impressive human service flag was formed by soldiers of the 164th Depot Brigade at Fort Riley in Kansas in 1917, as part of photographer Arthur Mole's living insignia collection. Mole would assemble an 80-foot platform and direct troops into position using a megaphone, which sometimes took several hours. This colorization by Jordan Lloyd helps give an idea of what the scene really looked like, but the faces of many of these soldiers have been lost to time. This photograph showing the US testing the hydrogen bomb in Bikini Atoll in 1946 is almost unbelievable. These explosions, codenamed Operation Crossroads, were carried out to test the effect of nuclear weapons on warships, and the huge Wilson cloud pictured here was the results of an underwater bomb dubbed Helen of Bikini. This incredible recoloring by Santa Dalloway adds a whole new layer of perspective, as the bright postcard-ready landscape stands out like paradise amongst destruction. The woman in these photographs might not ring any bells, but her life story is worthy of a Hollywood movie. Pauline Cushman was an American actress who led a double life as a spy during the Civil War, after the Union realized she could use her charisma and charm to relay information from Confederates. Her exploits earned her great recognition and the title of Brevet Major as appointed by President Lincoln. Santa Dalloway's recoloring of these 1865 photographs accentuates her contrasting public and private lives and helps to keep Cushman's incredible legacy alive. Here's a photo of the world's biggest domestic cat. Just kidding. Henry Behrens was the smallest man in the world at just 30 inches tall, who made a living traveling with Burton Lester's midget troupe. In this image from October 1956, Behrens dances with his pet cat in the doorway of his Worthing home, and this realistic colorization by Richard James Malloy injects a whole new level of joy into the quirky scene, which seems like a movie still. This photograph is not only an incredibly artistic self-portrait from 1960, but its subject, Astrid Kircher, had a big impact on the Beatles as we remember them today. In this recoloring by Richard Malloy, a young Kircher looks pensively at the mirror as if considering her own future. Kircher first overheard the band's music playing from a club in her hometown and asked to photograph them, unaware that this would be their first ever group photo. Later, as the official photographer, Kircher was responsible for the band's iconic mop-top haircuts, as well as recreational drug use, which influenced their music. Queen Victoria is known for her catchphrase, "We are not amused," and she truly lives up to it in this photograph taken in 1872 at the Thanksgiving service for the recovery of Edward, the Prince of Wales, following a typhoid scare. Victoria famously mourned the death of her husband Prince Albert in 1861 for decades, and she doesn't look too pleased to be making a rare public appearance in her ermine-trimmed signature black gown. This crisp recoloring by Jacinci really enhances the disdain on her face. But just imagine if someone told her she had over 30 years to go until her own death in 1901. From one queen to another, here's Victoria's great-great-granddaughter and current English monarch Elizabeth II during World War II in 1945. In 1942, aged just 16, Elizabeth registered with a labor exchange to become a truck mechanic with the Auxiliary Territorial Service, where she achieved the rank of Honorary Junior Commander. This colorization by Richard Malloy emphasizes the determination of a fresh-faced 18-year-old with a big future ahead. This image might show one of the most unique card games in history. These extraordinary players were the shortest, tallest, and fattest men in Europe. And this unique image from 1913 has been recolored by Jacinci to really bring the scene to life. Details like a cigar holster and two conjoined chairs supporting the enormous weight of Mr. Cannon Colossus become more visible, and its dreamlike quality reminds us of the wonders of human history. The charismatic chap in this photograph from 1958 is famous Spanish painter Pablo Picasso, who poses in Cannes with a revolver and holster gifted to him by American actor Gary Cooper. Jacinci's colorization brings out the mischievous expression on his face, and his fashionable outfit probably wouldn't be so out of place today. Allegedly, the father of the Cubism art movement would load the revolver with blanks and shoot at anyone who questioned the meaning behind his artworks. This intriguing image depicts an act of human brutality as U.S. Marine Dwayne L. Boyce burns out a weapons emplacement on Walmedo Island during the Korean War in September 1950. During a 5-day period of U.S. firebombing on the North-occupied island, several hundred civilians were killed, and it wasn't uncommon for flamethrowers like this to be deployed. A recolored version by Jacinci amplifies the horror, and you can almost feel the heat emitting from the roaring flames. The woman captured in this image from April 1945 is Lee Miller, the only female combat photographer in Europe during World War II, who photographed the German Dachau concentration camp before breaking into and bathing in Hitler's Munich apartment with fellow war correspondent David Sherman. Miller also stole possessions belonging to Hitler's mistresses, completely unaware that Hitler would kill himself in his bunker just hours after this photograph was taken. Richard Malloy's colorization enhances details like the mud trodden through the apartment and immortalizes the memory of one seriously ballsy woman. This photo is some serious nightmare fuel, and although the origins are up for debate, it seems to depict a group of children in grotesque papier-mâché heads somewhere around Southeast Asia during the 1940s. Jacinci's painstaking recoloring reimagines the costumes in full color, and the detailed paintwork on each mask is an incredible feat even by modern standards. As Halloween celebrations weren't widely popularized until the early 1950s, these larger-than-life characters probably appeared at a fair or circus. The scene in this photograph of New York's Madison Square Park is pretty much exactly how we would imagine life in 1900, with streets lined with horse-drawn carriages and corseted ladies in modest dresses. However, a generous lick of color, carefully added by Santa Dalloway, seems to transform our perspective with this vibrant composition. This sunny street now seems so lifelike that it could be the set of a period drama, and it definitely reminds us that history isn't so far away. Otto von Bismarck has been remembered as one of the most skilled politicians and diplomats in German history, who sadly deteriorated in health as he watched Wilhelm II undo his foreign policy with a new inflammatory approach. In his prime, Bismarck was a staunch leader with a signature steely look, But this recoloring of his portrait by Marilyn Monroe doesn't scrimp on the detail, with a depiction of Bismarck as a striking but graying leader with a vulnerable gaze. Many disasters have been caught on camera throughout history, and this image from 1918 shows the moment a huge hydrogen balloon housed at Fort Still in Oklahoma suddenly exploded, killing 6 troops and injuring 30 others. The balloon, used for the observation of artillery attacks, caught fire after a spark of static electricity formed between its fabric folds. This colorization by Jordan Lloyd emphasizes the true horror of the catastrophe, as the men securing the guiding cables desperately flee from the flames which rip through the balloon. This photograph might look like a movie poster or an advert for the world's most lavish fur coat, but the image dating back to 1947 actually depicts famous Danish explorer Peter Freuchen and his third wife Dagmar Kohn. At 6 foot 7 inches, Freuchen was a fearsome survivalist who even beat the bitter Arctic conditions by killing and skinning animals using a knife made of his own frozen feces. Richard Malloy's recoloring brings Freuchen to life in all his glory, from his coat made with polar bear pelt to the one-legged stance which he adopted after losing a leg to frostbite in 1926. This was one cool guy. It's hard to imagine what life was like for Texas cowboys in this image, who are pictured here enjoying a chuck wagon lunch during a cattle roundup in 1900. Thankfully, Santa Dalloway has produced a painstakingly detailed recoloring, which totally transforms the scene into a sight so vibrant it could be a movie set. New details are suddenly made visible, like the chuck box itself, with drawers full of tools, pots, and spices, as well as a miniature clock which reads about 12:40 p.m. The men are probably eating beans prepared by the camp cook on the left, while the finely dressed gentleman to the right may be a wealthy city slicker invited to tour with them. Everyone has seen these images captured as the German passenger airship LZ-129 Hindenburg caught fire as it attempted to dock with its mooring mast at the Naval Air Station Lakehurst on May 6, 1937. The disaster claimed 36 lives and has been immortalized in photographs and footage. But modern colorizations like these ones by Marilyn Monroe and Dana R. Keller allow us to imagine how terrifying the scene really looked in person. This tragic disaster ended the future of the airship, but the lives lost will never be forgotten. How was the Statue of Liberty built is not a question you ask yourself every day, but thankfully, photos like this exist to answer it for you. French craftsmen began constructing the wooden structure in Paris in 1976 in separate pieces, which would act as a mold for the copper statue itself, before it was shipped across the Atlantic for assembly. This recoloring by Marilyn Monroe breathes new life into the unusual scene and emphasizes the large scale of the work. And note the plaster painter almost camouflaged in white. The strange combination of elements in this photograph from 1961 seem almost out of place as Louis Armstrong plays the trumpet for his wife Lucille in Cairo at the Egyptian pyramids. This recoloring by dynamic chrome emphasizes the stark contrast between the landscape and the figures in the foreground. During the Cold War, the US would send jazz musicians like Armstrong abroad as ambassadors for the creative sensibility of American culture. The belief was that music which was unique to America, but which also represented a fusion of African American cultures, could act as a democratic art form. This heart-stopping image shows the moment a World War II F-6F-5 Hellcat White 23 plane burst into flames on arrival at the USS Lexington aircraft carrier on the 25th of February 1945. This colorization by Jacinci only heightens the jeopardy of the situation, and the brave pilot in the cockpit suddenly becomes more visible to the naked eye. The pilot, Arden Ives, miraculously survived the crash, only to be sadly killed during a dogfight with Japanese fighters on May 22nd that same year. Which of these recolored photographs has changed your perspective on human history? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.